It's time for Rick and Spursy.
Now call me real bro. Say no like to back and talk. Land to your fucking head. Do it up for what let me say.
Hey, it's Rick and Spursy. Tonight you have just Mike again. I know that most of you probably don't want to sit here and listen to me talk for an hour, but guess what? I've got the microphone, so let's kick this off. I'm gonna start by just popping open this Guinness. It's been a long day. It's been a long season, So let's just pop open this Guinness, get it poured, and just have a discussion. Um, once again, it seems that your hero has been abandoned by his team of Avengers. Which kind of sucks. I feel like I'm Iron Man, maybe the Hulk. Am I cool enough and smart enough to be Iron Man? Who knows? um, I'm probably more like the Hulk or like maybe Fat Thor from the last film. I don't know. It's I guess it doesn't really matter in the end. But while I let this Guinness do its thing, we can get into what we're going to talk about today, which you know um this today was kind of like the end of what we thought was going to be a crucial chapter in Tottenham's 25-26 season, and you know what ended up happening in this transfer window is what we can only describe as the window that just didn't quite open. Um, it opened enough to get a couple of signings in, and just enough to send Brennan Johnson out, who in hindsight probably would have been a great addition at this point with all the injuries we have. But let's kind of get into it. Let's just kind of start with the facts here. Um, we had only by today, by January 31st, actually, we had only completed two significant signings. Conor Gallagher from Atletico Madrid, and another fucking teenager, Souza from Santos, and that's it. And like we said, Brennan Johnson takes off for Crystal Palace. Basically, like for like fee for Gallagher. And we just signed another young 18-year-old striker, James Wilson. So he's here from Hearts, which he's here on loan for the U21s, but he's not going to be get any kind of an impact first team player. So we can just dismiss that from straight off the top. For a club that had like 80 plus million in transfer funds unspent, with an injury list that just kind of keeps going and going and going like a ticker tape from the 1920s stock market. Reading kind of like a novel of absentee players. It's kind of understandable why a lot of fans feel kind of exasperated. In press conferences, Thomas Frank defends the club strategy. Of course he does, because he's kind of on the hot seat right now, right? Arguing, quite recently and quite famously now that transfers are not like playing Football Manager. I don't know what that means because I'm not a Football Manager player, so I'm not intelligent enough to play Football Manager. I could probably do NFL Manager if there was such a thing. But like he insisted that the Lewis family and the Spurs hierarchy were committed to the project, and even acknowledging like a genuine attempt to sign a winger recently, like Antoine Semenyo, which you know he ends up playing for Man City, but instead of Spurs. But you know, as as we sit here and talk about it, like being saying that there's any kind of um saying that we're being aggressive by saying, "Hey, we tried," "Hey, we tried." FC is not the club that we want to be here, right? Um, we had today Christian Romero publicly blasting the club, calling the situation disgraceful on his social media um, after the Manchester City game. So um, this was a squad that we had barely anybody available for. Any true first team players. We cobbled together a squad, and that perhaps more than like any press briefing that could give us says almost everything about how that window ended. Um, and what we are is a squad that is just absolutely paper thin. We have a fan base who's pissed off. We have a fan base who, again, like I said, is exasperated. We're tired. We're frustrated, um, and when you get the booing and you get all the stuff that happens, on the field in terms of the product that's on the field and in terms of um, what the fans expect to see out of a team that claims to be a Big Six team. Um, it really also ends up causing a lot of players to vent their frustration. We saw in the past Mickey Van de Ven and Jed Spence venting some frustration about the play. So like you know this isn't going to get better, without some sort of high caliber, high quality recruiting for first team players. And yet, and here's something. This is something that I've been railing on about year after year, which is yes, of course, we want to strengthen our youth academy, right? Um, the youth academy was left kind of threadbare over the seasons as it became less and less of a priority for the club. But at the same time, we weren't prioritizing first team players. We weren't prioritizing, um, you know, good young experienced players. We were prioritizing uh, who we could get on the cheap for the best deal. And so over the past 4 seasons, all we've been doing, it seems, is recruiting these really, really young players. But these really, really young players that we're recruiting to come um, and play for Tottenham, they end up getting endless loans because you have managers that don't trust them or won't play them, won't give them their shot. You have, we had Conte, who famously doesn't play youth players, right? We have we had Ange, who had to play some of the youth players because he had to, not because he wanted to. Like Mikey Moore, Archie Gray probably would have made it into the squad had we not had the injuries we had under Ange. So, you know, and we can talk about how the recruiting didn't really go well again, and we don't know what that's down to. But what we can't deny is that there is an absolute injury crisis, which required the recruiting of a lot of first team players to be able to come in and steady the ship. I mean, these are rough waters that we're getting in right now, and so we need to talk about this. And like, this January didn't just bring us a lackluster kind of transfer window. It was really compounded by another relentless injury crisis. So let's talk about all of the absentees here. We had Kudus out with a thigh injury, right? And he's not going to be returning anytime soon, probably not until at least after the international break. Bentancur, obviously, he's out, underwent hamstring surgery. He's going to be gone for months and probably gone forever after that. Other key figures, Richarlison, gone. We never know when he's going to be coming back. Ben Davis, gone. He's probably never coming back. And not in any kind of significant player capacity. Lucas Bergvall, they also missing significant time. And on top of that, we have Mickey Van de Ven, who's been gone, Pedro Porro, who's gone, Jed Spence, who's gone. Like, and obviously there was a lot of relief when Dominic Solanke came back, and finally kind of regained some fitness, but he's just kind of coming back into full sharpness. Like, he started to score goals, doing what he was supposed to do. And of course, yeah, he is affecting the team. And we'll get into that a little bit after. But, even Thomas Frank admitted that, like, he was forced to play him in some of the tough games because the options were so limited. And like I was just saying, we have defenders like Mickey and Pedro Porro, who, Pedro Porro has been an animal, has been an Iron Man for this squad. For this club for years now, and playing every single fucking minute. It's insane to me. But when you combine all of these multiple, we can't even start to talk about Decky and James Madison, right? Who are going to be out until God knows when. So, like, when you combine all these long-term injuries with the decision to sell Johnson, and have the misfortune of Kudus getting injured 2 days later, it's no surprise that the fans are a little irritated and at this point, outright panicked. I mean, we're at a turning point for this club right now, and every single fixture that we play in seems some sort of effort to limit damage, right? So let's kind of get into what we've been seeing through this injury crisis. At the end of January, we traveled to Germany. We got back-to-back weeks wins versus German sides. And, in the state that we're in right now in our league, it really, really shows you the weakness of the Bundesliga, right? Obviously, Eintracht Frankfurt aren't the greatest team in the Bundesliga. In fact, they're not even there. Probably, I think they ended up last place in the Champions League. And they were playing with a caretaker manager, which, where does that lead us to believe what might happen if we let Thomas Frank go right now? Like, where are they looking, and what would we be looking to do? But we also beat Borussia Dortmund, which is sitting at number 2 right now in the Bundesliga. So it does kind of talk, and it does speak to the skill and ability of the Premier League to play against some of these German sides, right? So we traveled to Germany after beating Dortmund at home, and we produced a very professional. We needed to get that win, right, to assure ourselves of advancement in the league, in the Champions League, top 8, which we got. We ended up top 4, right? So very professional performance, 2-0 win. Colomani scoring against his old club again. Dominic Solanke scores. And this result was legitimately the first bit of any kind of positive momentum in weeks. And it really showcased that Spurs can compete at that high level, even amid this adversity. But again, it is the Bundesliga, and it shows you the difference in the level of play in both of these leagues, and how that they play, the Bundesliga and even some of the other bigger European teams just play so wide open, and less physical than the Premier League, And then we get into Sunday's draw against Manchester City, which that result looks pretty decent on paper, but it was really, really. I mean, we need to highlight the fact that only 11 senior players were available for this game. We effectively had no bench that were not children. So I mean, imagine that for like just one second. Champions League knockout hopefuls, top 4 contenders, and you're up against the Premier League's elite, right? Spurs have virtually no squad depth. We still earned a point, which is kind of both at the same time inspiring and absolutely terrifying. We could talk about the abysmal tactics that played into what we saw in the first half in Manchester City, jumping out to a 2-0 lead. And they could have easily scored 4 or 5 goals in that first half. I mean, we were truly, truly, truly outplayed, outmaneuvered, out-tacticked. And if you're watching those goals, it didn't seem there was like a whole ton of skill going into scoring those goals. But it kind of played into that injury crisis that we had talked about, and no seasoned professionals really on the bench. So both those results, because of that second half that we saw Xavi. Xavi, and this guy continues to impress me as he gets more and more comfortable with the state of the style of play in the Premier League. He continues to impress, and he continues to and I know it's been made, the comparison's been made a lot, and we understand that Xavi is not on a level with Florian Wirtz, but like when you're looking at those two players, and the struggles that both of them have had adjusting to the speed, to the physicality, to the defending in the Premier League, it can really, really highlight what it takes to play in this league. And I think Xavi is really, really working hard, and he's starting to show signs, those quote unquote green shoots that we talk about a lot. So I think that that second half showed a team that, and I don't know, are they playing for the coach? Are they playing for themselves? Are they playing for the fans? I like to think it's all three, but, judging by the way that we have heard the team talk about Thomas Frank, or the players talk about the club, they're out there playing for themselves. They're playing out there playing for the fans. So they are playing for the badge, but it doesn't mean that they're playing for Thomas Frank. So, these results, what they reveal is a team that is hungry, they're competitive, they're resilient, but they're also like super, super fragile. They're stretched thin. They're stretched to the point of breaking, right? And when you have a team that's at that point, you can have one of two things happen. They can become very, very, very dangerous. They can become a more cohesive unit if they're playing for themselves. It doesn't seem like they're fighting with each other. It seems like they want to do this. They want to do what's best for them, what's best for the fans. These are seasoned professionals. I've said this a number of times. These are professionals. They're not going to go out there and pitch a fit and just lose a game because because they're mad at the coach. They're not going to go out there and they're going to try and do what the coach says, which in that first half of the City game was some garbage tactics. I think what these players on this particular squad do is thrive on chaos. They thrive in situations where they are dictating the chaos, right? So what is the question that every single Spurs fan is asking? And I know we've rehashed this over and over again, but what does it mean for Thomas Frank? I think these last two performances solidified his spot for the rest of the season, if I'm being completely honest. There's no sugarcoating it. We're sitting bottom half, close to relegation. Right now in the Premier League, we may be at the top of the Champions League table, but that doesn't really mean anything until the rubber hits the road and we're actually playing in Europe in a home and away fixture versus one of the final 16 teams. So again, there's no sugarcoating this at all. It's been a tough season, and it's really, really highlighted by poor results at home, and the win percentages pale in comparison to the successes of last season, and obviously, yeah, unacceptable that we finished 17th last season. That was really, really down to the injuries and having to prioritize the European matches, knowing that if we just played pragmatically enough, smart enough, that we could pull through and win the Europa League, which is no small feat. I'm not saying that it was a small feat at all. I'm just saying that the Europa is not the Champions League. And I'm also not saying that we couldn't make a run on the Champions League. We absolutely can. But the rumors swirling around Frank's job security, Reddit threads have been going wild and debating whether the change is going to be looming at some point. But here's the nuance of this whole situation is that Frank walked into one of the most injury hit Spurs sides in years. He walked into it knowing that this team that this team has had injury issues in the previous season, and he still took the job. Players that he counted on for continuity from last season: Kulusevski injured last year, Madison injured against Newcastle in the preseason, Solanke having a minor injury early on, and then he disappears for months. So at the same time, the club is in the team was forced to cope with those injuries while also trying to juggle European commitments. And when that happens, you know, a lot of these players are playing a lot of minutes, and what happens again? Players playing too many minutes, players playing in too many competitions, players going off and playing internationally during the breaks. You know, that same injury crisis is happening again, and it's now partly the excuse for being used to defend Thomas Frank. And despite what our good friend Steve has to say about it, and despite like my love of the phrase "next man up," I don't know that the defense of any defense that I could mount for Thomas Frank right now, if Spurs were to struggle any further, would or even slip lower in the table than they are. I think any kind of that stuff swirling around that narrative could really shift quickly. Um, for now, it obviously seems that the club is willing to back him, um, even through this injury, especially through this injury crisis, through the run of poor results. Um, and that's even just while the fans and pundits are screaming for change. Like lot of the a lot of the pundits out there are saying that Frank shouldn't be given the time. This is and it's not just um the pundits that are Spurs fans or the pundits that are ex players. I think that Thomas Frank stays the rest of the season, and I think that somehow um he gets to the end of the season and that's it. And I think that may have something to do uh with the fact that they didn't buy any players. I think they're just going to try, and I think being, what are we, 9 points clear now of relegation? That's good. That would be a pretty amazing turnaround for the number 18 team, and the teams currently below us to make, with Spurs losing almost all of their games. I think Spurs 10, 12 points and they're probably safe, for the rest of the season. And obviously they have shown, and they did show the other day, that they can eke out draws against, teams that are vying for the title, right? So, um, and with Spurs holding a spot in the Champions League knockouts right now, and having shown flashes of some tactical ability in the past few games, I think, and being able to change, and the team being able to change and adapt, as well as Thomas Frank being able to change and adapt, I think his future really depends on how we navigate this gauntlet of matches in February, um, and in a little bit in March too. It more than what actually has happened in December and January itself, right? Um, uh, so where does this kind of leave us? Um, let's kind of look ahead. I mean, we're already at 30 minutes. I am not able to drink while we're doing this, but so you're not going to get a hey Mike tonight. But um you're just going to have to listen to me blab for the next 25, 30 minutes, so as you just have. Here's where calendar awareness really pays off. Right? So we have to be aware of the games that are coming up. We have to understand where Spurs could be left at the end of February. Started off pretty well, but we now kind of enter a stretch of Premier League games uh against against, let's just call it what it is, uh teams that are all vying for European spots. So there are fixtures within that Spurs should absolutely compete in. I think that Spurs can compete against the likes of Newcastle. They can compete against the likes of Fulham. I don't think there's any reason for that, to worry about that. I think April and May are going to be what digs Spurs out of the shit, when you get to play the Nottingham Forests of the world again. But a run of poor results can drag us right back into that relegation battle, depending on what happens with a lot of these other clubs that are below us right now. But if you're looking at it, we are only 5 points off eighth place. And I know that is some Nicky Winks style, you know, promising, happy clapper type viewpoint. But I just don't want anybody to, as fans, we have to understand that there's still that relegation battle that we could be in. And that could factor in when trying to navigate the injuries um, and through the European midweeks, right? That are gonna be happening. But there is potentially a silver lining. Um, so, and this is where I like to have a little fun, because I do like watching the U21s and the U18s play and see their development, see what kind of players are coming up next. I've always had a soft spot for uh, baseball being one of my favorite sports. Watching these younger players coming up through the minor leagues of baseball, um, and I even have a soft spot for watching some of these younger kids coming up through the USL 2 through their college programs with my very own Vermont Green here in Vermont. Um, so we have because of these injuries, we have to start thinking about giving some of these younger players some minutes. Obviously, Dane Scarlett's been given a couple of minutes here and there, but Junai Byfield has been given some minutes, lots of minutes actually. And despite the fact that he has just turned 17, uh, it's amazing to me that he's out there. I mean, he is a monstrous human being too. I don't know if anybody has ever really watched him out there, but he looks just as much a man as any of these other players out there. Um, so I don't he's not lacking for size, and he's probably not going to be lacking for some physicality once he figures out how to play the game and how to not get nervous every time he touches the ball. I think the game against Man City, he got kind of slapped in there and was trying his best to just not fuck up a pass, right? But this is something that obviously these types of situations, these types of injury situations, can accelerate the development of a lot of the Spurs next generation players, especially if you have um, coaches who are less willing to play some of these players. We may not have not seen as much out of Archie Gray last year and this year. Archie Gray's probably I would be willing to bet at the age that he's at right now is probably he's got to be the youngest player with the most minutes in the Premier League at least right now. Um, so like lots of times when you have young players that are thrown into the fire against top opposition, top teams, um, they can, like when we send them down to the championship, right? And we always talk about, oh, they send them down to the championship, let their ankles get kicked out a bit. Um, you know, it it helps harden a player, and it helps them become kind of battle tested and improved. And on the other side of that, if they're not successful, it can destroy a player. But um, in that sense, like an injury crisis, when you get to play some of those players, they get some experience in the Premier League. It could actually produce long term benefits if the club actually trusts in the coaching staffs actually trust the academy and nurtures these talents properly. But what we've been seeing is, like I said at the top of the show, endless loans for some of these players. Dane Scarlett was a promising young player. Um, Jamie Donnelly, promising young player. Troy Parrott had been a promising young player. And like it's in a lot of these players, we never intended, it seemingly never intended to actually allow to play. They were cheap buys. We're going to develop them a little bit, and then we're going to sell them for a profit. There was never any intention of um some of these young players that were buying. I don't know if we're ever going to see our young South Korean, just like we didn't see our young Japanese player. Like I think that we buy these players with intention to sell, knowing that they're inexpensive, right? I just don't know any other way to put it. So I guess right now we find ourselves in an injury crisis. We find ourselves in a crisis of results in the Premier League. But there is a bright side to all of this. There is a bright side, um, and that is that right now, I think that Spurs are can be at a turning point. I think like the players should go out there and use the moment, and use that second half as the catalyst. Use that fire that's coming out of Christian Romero as a catalyst. Use the fire that's coming out of um, the seasoned veterans. I say seasoned veterans, but like Conor Gallagher is still a young man. Still a young man out there. Um, Use the experience. Some of these players need to use the experience. Um, Pop Sar's been looking great, since he came back. Solanke's coming back into fitness. You even like, unfortunately, Odebear was sick, but we got to see Odebear, you know, coming back into fitness and actually starting to understand how to move. I don't think there's a defender in this league that wants to take him on one on one. I mean, he just moves so quickly. He can be silky on the ball. And unfortunately, on the backside of that, I think we have players in the squad that just don't seem to care anymore, and are going through the motions. And I'm kind of looking at Randall Colomani, um, which is unfortunate. But I'm glad we didn't sell him back to Juventus. We're probably going to end up playing them in the Champions League. And as we know, he does like to score against his old teams. Well, so far historically for Tottenham, he has, because he hasn't done it for us in the league. It's another example of a player who just hasn't fit into the Premier League and hasn't figured it out yet. Yeah, it's a tough moment for Tottenham right now. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to give you guys some closing thoughts because talking for an hour is kind of tough. I've done it a few times and we know that, but um, it's kind of tough. So let's just go ahead and kind of recap, um, and talk about the kind of reality we find ourselves in as Spurs fans and that the team might find themselves in right now. So and recap exactly what we've talked about tonight. We had a frustrating January window, where our depth wasn't adequately addressed, um, and that could lead to some really, really bad things in the league. But I think Thomas Frank um, securing his space right now in the league position he's in was a very big thing. But let's not get too excited about it because we've done that in the past. We've done that this season. And obviously seeing the criticism coming from the fans and the players is not a good thing. It seems like there's always something with Tottenham, and that's what we always talk about. We're in the midst of a brutal injury crisis, that has really has impacted um, the squad selections, um, and really has cast doubt on a lot of the long term planning, which again shakes hands uh, with the fact that we didn't buy anybody, right? Um, Again, we have mixed results. We have the mixed results from Europe to the league, that underline the fragility of the squad right now. And we have a manager whose job isn't really actually safe, and even though he's out there in the public saying that. But I don't know in what context the performances being put out there by Spurs and by the Spurs players are gonna buy him time. Like I think every single time he gets on the precipice of like he should be sacked, something, we have a nice performance in Europe that saves him. We eke out a draw that gets us a point that saves him. I don't think there was ever any thought or intention on the part of the ownership group or Venkateshan to sell him or to sack him. So this is the moment of dread for us fans and anticipation, right? So obviously, I don't want this to be that moment where the January window of 2026 defines the downfall of our season. I want it to be kind of a turning point toward growth in a time of like immense adversity. And only time will tell on that. But in the end, I think that we can be pissed off all we want as Spurs fans. But that isn't going to change the minds. It's not going to change the thoughts of the billionaires sitting up in their fancy boxes or traveling around in their fancy planes. That's not going to change them one bit. They're going to run their business in the way that they want to run their business. They're going to keep the coach that there's not much that a fan base can do. And I know that the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust thinks that they can affect change. But, you didn't really see that big planned walkout. And what was the 70th minute they were going to walk out? You didn't see that materialize at all. And I know that's not just the supporters. That's not Supporters Trust doing that, but they're the groups that do organize those kinds of things. They are part of the Supporters Trust. They take their cues from the Supporters Trust. I don't buy into the nonsense that the Supporters Trust puts out there, thinking that they're the ones affecting change, because they're not. The only people that affect change are the players and the coaching staff, and the billionaires' pockets. Now, if there were some way to create an action that would hit the billionaires in their pockets, then I'm all for it. But the problem is that if you don't go out there and spend the money, somebody else is going to. And a run of results will change anybody's mind. It just will. I want to sit here and I do want to thank every single one of you guys who keep tuning into this every week. If I don't care if there's one person listening, I don't care if there's 200 people listening, 500 people listening. If it's just one of you out there listening, that's great. But I want everybody to go out there, and I just want you to kind of put everything into perspective, and realize in the end that this is just a sport, and I'm here talking into this silly microphone as kind of therapy for myself. And if it happens to help any other Spurs fans out there, that's kind of why I do it. I don't do it for money. I don't do it for recognition, nothing like that. I obviously I wouldn't be here by myself if I didn't love doing it, and if I didn't use it as a therapy session every single week. So I just want everybody to remember, go out there, protect your mental health, talk to your neighbor, introduce yourself, you know, speak to people, get to know other people. I mean, there's a lot out there in the world, and there's a lot of good to be seen in the world. And I know it seems like it's shit right now, but the world can be a good place, and you just have to avail yourself to meeting new people and uh, in experiencing new things. So go out there, protect your mental health, be safe. And as Steve says, don't be an asshole. But until next time, friends, up the fucking Spurs.